Haunting us in at number 10, we have Idaho's scariest ghost. Raymond Allen Snowden used to be referred to as Idaho's Jack the Ripper because he brutally slayed a woman while he was out on a date with her, and he showed absolutely no remorse. He slashed her throat and stabbed her skull, severing her spinal cord. If that wasn't brutal enough, the corpse also had 30 stab wounds all over her body. He even bragged about murdering her while he was locked up. He was sentenced to death by hanging, but when it came time for his execution, his neck didn't snap properly and he spent 15 minutes gasping for air before he finally died. According to this urban legend, if you visit Idaho State Penitentiary, you can hear someone gasping for air, and strange things have occurred at this prison that no one is able to explain. Seems like this prison needs some sage or holy water, get rid of this ghost. Private prisons use 3rd grade test scores to plan for prison beds, and this makes it onto our list at number 9. There is an urban legend that says that the government uses 3rd grade test scores to determine future number of prison beds that will be needed. So basically they believe that there is a correlation with low test scores at this age and the likelihood that they will go to prison. This is actually an urban legend that has been circulating for a long time, and a lot of people think that it is true. Well, I'm here to clear the air that this is only an urban legend. They actually use 4th grader test scores, not 3rd graders. Okay, all jokes aside, I bet they use a very similar strategy to actually predict how many people will be sent to prison each year. It's actually scary to think about it, so let's move on. I don't want to know if someone thinks I'm going to prison. Things get pretty intense in at number 8. We have this urban legend of Lavinia Fisher. According to this legend, she is known as America's first female serial killer. Lavinia and her husband ran a bed and breakfast just north of Charleston, and this is where a lot of travelers would stop into to get some rest. Little did they know that Lavinia would serve poisoned tea to her victims in order to rob them of their possessions. She would lure wealthy men into a room and serve them this poisoned tea. She would suggest that they would get some rest on a particular bed that had a trapdoor beneath it. When the victim would pass out, she pulled a lever, causing their bodies to just fall into the pit below the house. One night a man stopped at this bed and breakfast for some rest, and he was invited to have some tea. He really didn't like the tea, but he was too polite to refuse. When Lavia wasn't looking, he dumped his tea in the plant next to him, though she thought he drank it. He felt that she was acting strange, so he decided to leave and go back to his room. Lavinia thought he drank the poisoned tea, so when she went into his room to rob him and drop his body into the pit, he was stunned to learn what her real motives were. He was able to escape and report the whole thing. The Fishers were executed in 1820, and according to the local legend, her spirit haunts the Charleston jail where she was hanged. Things get even more spooky in at number 7 with the Montana Territorial Prison. This was a prison that was operational in the late 1800s. However, due to lack of funding and exceeding capacity, the prison quickly became overcrowded and violent. The prisoners were basically starving to death, and they were crammed into small spaces that they began to show extreme violent behaviors. A lot of the prisoners committed suicide and even killed each other. Because the prison was so underfunded, it remained in a dirty and rundown state for over a century until a massive riot broke out and the prisoners took control for a whole day in 1959. The prison was shut down in 1976, but visitors claim that they have heard voices, footsteps, and scary sounds lurking through the abandoned halls. Some people even say that they can feel ghosts touching them, or there have been ghosts pushing people. Apparently you can also feel a sense of impending doom, and you feel like you're always going to be attacked. Well, if I were to ever plan a trip to Idaho, I don't think I'm going to this prison for any tour anytime soon. I think I would rather spend my time eating Idaho potatoes instead of being attacked by scary prison ghosts. But that's just me. Moving into number 6, we're talking about Cripple Creek Jail. I mean, whoa, with a name like that, no wonder this prison is haunted and has a creepy urban legend. If I was a ghost, that would be a prison I would want to haunt. But seriously, who's in charge of naming this building? This poorly named jailhouse was opened in 1901, and it was in operation for almost 100 years. Only one prisoner was known to die within the jail walls after he fell from a second-floor catwalk. After his death, there have been strange paranormal activities that no one can explain. People have heard heavy footsteps going up and down the wooden staircase. There is a ghost child who can always be seen roaming the hallways looking for her parents, but the scariest urban legend is about the dead prisoner's cell. It is reported that if you walk past this cell, you can feel a hand reach out and grab you. Some people have even said that they felt their hair being pulled and they felt someone breathing heavily on their necks. And now at number 5 we have the Wyoming Territorial Prison. This one is pretty creepy. This prison is known to be a hotspot for paranormal and unexplained occurrences. During its 80-year run, the prison housed some of the most violent and sadistic criminals who ever walked the planet. One of them was a very young inmate named Andrew Pickley, who was a child serial killer and cannibal who was executed in the 1960s. After it was closed, the prison became a huge tourist attraction because there are mainly ghost urban legends that surround this prison. Lots of people claim that they can hear Andrew's creepy voice screaming about wanting to eat human flesh and how he wants to mutilate your body. Some other visitors also claimed that they feel cold spots and a spooky feeling that something bad is gonna happen. The Russian sleep experiment comes onto our list at number 4. Alright guys, prepare yourselves because this urban legend is pretty brutal. Let me take you guys back to the 1940s, where Russian researchers wanted to conduct an experiment. They wanted to see what the effects were if you deprived yourself of sleep. Why? I'm not sure, but due to ethical reasons, they didn't want to pick any volunteers off the street. They decided to force 5 prisoners to participate in this experiment. Yeah, that's so ethical. The prisoners were given an experimental gas that would prevent them from sleeping. Their conversations were recorded and monitored through video cameras and a two-way mirror. This is just so mean. Well, for the first few days, everything was fine. The prisoners were behaving normally, but on the 5th day, things got really bad. The prisoners became paranoid and started whispering about each other in the microphones. Eventually, the prisoners were running around, screaming, and almost breaking their vocal cords. On the 5th day, the experimenters decided to put in fresh air instead of harmful gas, but that just made things even worse. One prisoner died, and the other severely mutilated their bodies. They tore off their flesh, ripped out their abdomen, and muscles as well. When the researchers came to remove them from the room, the prisoners refused, and they wanted to be locked up forever. Eventually, all of the prisoners were shot and killed because they wanted to cover up this highly unethical experiment. Now, many people claim that this is only an urban legend and shouldn't be taken seriously, but I think there's a chance of it being real. I mean, there are so many experiments that humans have done in the past that would be totally illegal today, which is why people want to keep it hidden. Shepton Mallet Prison brings us to number 3. This prison has some pretty intense people locked up behind bars. People such as child killers, rapists, and gangsters wreaked havoc here until they were either executed or their prison shut down. There was a ton of murders and suicides that happened here, and this is why this prison is known to have a lot of angry and vengeful ghosts. This urban legend says that if you visit this old haunted prison, an old prison ghost will follow you home and haunt you for the rest of your life. So yeah, I don't think I'd be willing to take that risk. Imagine if the child killer followed you home. I mean, no thanks. I think this prison should be burned to the ground, or at least have a priest bless this prison. Our next prison urban legend brings us to the Eastern State Penitentiary, and this takes us to number 2. This prison was one of the most expensive buildings built in the US, and it was going to be used as a prototype to build 300 other prisons. The facility was operated by a corrupt company who opened up the prison doors to people who wanted to lock themselves up in order to find God. These people might have been under the impression that they're gonna find God, but they were literally placed in hell. They had to live in complete solitude and silence, and if they broke any of the rules, they would have to face severe punishments, such as the mad chair, where they would be strapped so tightly to a chair it was impossible for them to move. They would sit there for days without food, and eventually they would go insane. So apart from the prison being a nightmare, there's an urban legend about a locksmith who was doing some repairs on cell block number 4. He was hired to remove a very old lock from the cell door, but as he was working, he felt a massive force overcome him where he had an outer body experience. He said that this lock is the gateway to some place evil, and anyone who dares remove it will experience terrible things. To this day, that lock remains there because people are absolutely terrified of the consequences. The infamous Alcatraz prison scares us in at number 1. This is recognized as the most notorious prison in the entire world. I actually visited the prison a few years back, and it's pretty scary, and you can definitely sense evil within the prison walls. Although the prison has a lot of paranormal activity and a ton of urban legends, I want to talk about cell 14D. This cell was used to brutally punish prisoners who got out of line. The prisoners would be kept in the small cell with a toilet, sink. There'd be only one light bulb on and a mattress that was only given to them at nighttime. There were several of these punishment cells, but cell 14D had very active spirits. People who visited this cell reported a raw coldness, and they feel a sudden evil force. Prisoners locked in cell 14D screamed throughout the night, and they have all said that they saw a creature with glowing red eyes. One prisoner who screamed that he was being killed by this demon ghost, well, he was actually found the next morning strangled to death, and he also had unexplainable marks all over his body. The prison guards are claiming that this is only an urban legend, but what if it's just a big cover-up for the way the prison guards mistreated their inmates? Maybe a prison guard killed this prisoner and made up this entire urban legend. Cropsey creeps onto this list in at number 10. Kids who live on Staten Island have been terrorized by scary stories about an escaped mental patient who would snatch innocent children. There are different variations of this urban legend. Some people say that Cropsey has a hook for a hand and he uses that to steal kids. Others believe that he carries out a bloody axe, while some people say that he's a demon that terrorizes the woods at nighttime. Although Cropsey was just known as a scary urban legend, this story became a reality when children started to go missing for real. Pottawatomie County Jail brings us to number 9. This prison is notoriously known to house some of the most sadistic criminals. Inmates would be locked up here while they are waiting on death row, and even though only 3 inmates died inside of these prison walls, some pretty horrifying things have happened here. According to the local legend, the 3 inmates who were executed here and the superintendent haunt this prison. The superintendent was very attached to this prison, so his ghost can be seen lurking in the halls looking to punish the inmates. Even though this prison is no longer in operation, visitors have reported feeling something tugging on them, feeling an intense amount of sadness in some of the cells, or they felt that there was a presence there that wasn't visible. Why are people visiting the jail when it's not even open? Sounds like a bad idea to me. Number 8, we have the Missouri State Penitentiary. This prison was named the bloodiest 47 acres in America because of its brutal and intense history. There have been over 100 organized paranormal investigations here because it is one of the most haunted prisons in America. But according to the local legend, the most haunted place in the entire prison is A Hall and the solitary confinement chamber. One of the scariest ghosts that haunts the prison is located in cell 47. Well, cell 47 was a prisoner who was brutally murdered with a sledgehammer during a prison riot. His spirit was photographed during one of the paranormal investigations. Yeah, that's not creepy at all. It is believed that his spirit is extremely violent and aggressive. So if I were you, I wouldn't be visiting this creepy prison anytime soon. Maxwell Tree Police Station makes its way onto this list at number 7. This prison was one of the first in the country to attempt to house inmates separately. So because of this, the warden was required by law to visit the inmates every single day. This doesn't sound too bad, right? Wrong. The inmates were routinely tortured in order to gain control. Some of them were soaked in water and then hung out during winter. Others were tightly chained to a chair and it was impossible to move. They were bound so tightly that their circulation was cut off. So this torture method resulted in a lot of amputations. But these horror stories still didn't compare to the urban legends surrounding the basement of this prison, because the majority of the tortures occurred in the basement. It is said that the ghosts of the inmates haunt these walls and you could still hear them moaning, crying, and rattling their chains. Ottawa Jail creeps into number 6. This old building served as Ottawa's prison for over 100 years. So that's plenty of time to generate a couple of urban legends at this notorious jail. The Ottawa Jail was the site of 3 horrific executions. These inmates were hung in the gallows, and it is said that their ghosts haunt this building to this very day. The jail has been converted into a hostel, so you can actually stay the night, and it's pretty damn cheap. That's if you're brave enough. But just be warned, some people have claimed that an angry ghost was seen appearing at the foot of their bed, or that they can hear some screaming and necks breaking as they pass the gallows. I don't think even if this place is cheap, I would be staying there anytime soon. No thank you. I mean, I just wouldn't be able to sleep here. So I'd be paying to sleep at a place that I just won't be able to sleep. Moving on to number 5 with Lincoln Heights Jail. The prison was opened in 1931, but they closed their doors in 1965. Probably because there was so much abuse and brutality there. there. On Christmas Day, 7 inmates were brutally beaten and 8 police officers were arrested after an in-depth investigation was ordered. This beating was known as Bloody Christmas. So it was incidents like this one that makes people believe that this abandoned prison is haunted. According to the urban legend, there used to be a very vicious and nasty inmate that made the other prisoners desperately uncomfortable. People say that the guards would place misbehaving inmates in the same cell as these deranged criminals, and when they made their rounds, the other inmates, they would be dead. Hopefully this really is an urban legend, because that would be pretty brutal if the story was actually real. All we can do right now is speculate. A Nottingham prison breaks into this list at number 4. The prison was built on a Saxon settlement that dates all the way back to 600 AD. And this is why people believe that this prison is haunted by a ton of ghosts and poltergeists. People say that when you come into the prison, you can hear random doors just slamming shut, creepy whispers, and sudden drops in temperature. To top everything else off, this prison also had a courtroom and performed many executions. So it's a one-stop shop for prisoners. They could be tried, sentenced, and punished all under the same roof. Mansfield Reformatory comes into number 3. This prison has been the backdrop for a lot of famous movies such as Shawshank Redemption and Air Force One. Both really good movies, but this prison also has a very violent past. Back in the 1930s, a riot broke out, and once the dust settled, 120 inmates were condemned to share 12 cells for the whole week. During their torture, they weren't given any food or water, which caused a lot of them to go insane or die. And over the course of its 94 years of operation, a lot of other prisoners died here due to diseases and suicide. Because of the high death toll, they put a cemetery on the grounds, and now there are over 200 graves. So as the urban legend goes, these tortured souls haunt the prison. Visitors have said that they have been aggressively pushed and punched by spirits. They feel sudden chills, they hear cell doors slamming shut, and they see a lot of dark spirits roaming around the halls. Next up, number 2 is a St. Augustine jail. It is a common belief that the prisoners who were sent here, they were there to be punished, not rehabilitated. They were brutally tortured on a constant basis, and a lot of the prisoners were executed here in an inhumane way. So because of St. Augustine's dark past, a lot of scary paranormal goes on here. People believe that you can hear an evil laugh echoing in the hall, you can hear chains rattling and footsteps approaching you from behind. But be aware, because if you go on a paranormal tour here, make sure you don't visit the kitchen. There is a legend of a prisoner who haunts the kitchen by throwing knives at his unsuspecting victims. And topping this list, and at number 1, we have the HMP Shrewsbury Prison. There have been a ton of gruesome deaths that have occurred here over the years, including murders and suicide. There was actually so many suicides that an investigation was launched after 3 inmates hanged themselves over a period of just 2 weeks. It is said that the prison A wing is the most haunted part of the prison. The hanging room was converted into a session room, but it is definitely not a place that you would want to be in. Some officers who worked here in the past have said that they've been pushed down the stairs while they were working alone. They've heard doors slamming shut, seen things move around, and footsteps. It is believed that one of the dead female prisoners refused to leave, and she will try to grab anyone who is in her way and drag them to the execution chamber.
Number 10. The strip cell. Prison is already bad as it is. Everyone is mean to you, and they don't even let you bring in your super rare collection of Yu-Gi-Oh cards so everyone knows how cool you are. And at Alcatraz, they would go the extra mile to make sure your stay at one of the harshest prisons in the world was even worse. Rumor has it they would put you in the basement of cell block D, which was nicknamed the strip cell because they would strip you naked and throw you in there with nothing. It would be pitch black, there would be no mattress, no pillow, no sink, not even a toilet. You had to poop in a hole in the ground. Not even a seat, it was just a straight up poop hole. They would also barely feed you. You would only get 1 glass of water and 1 piece of bread a day. I guess the benefit of that would be you wouldn't have to use the poop hole a lot. And I don't think I have to mention, you were in complete isolation. It's unknown how long prisoners would be shoved into these little holes, but some speculate it could have been months before you were released. Number 9. The utility corridor. The whole point of Alcatraz prison is it was supposed to be so isolated that no prisoner could escape. The people who designed the prison thought that by building a prison on an isolated island would give inmates such loss of hope that it would break their spirits and then in turn make them easier to reform. Little did they know that criminals are a pretty motivated bunch, and these psychological tactical tactics didn't stop a bunch of people from trying to escape, 3 of whom were Bernard Coy, Marvin Hubbard, and Joe Kretzer. They had the crafty idea of trying to find a way to sneak out through the utility corridor, and it would have worked too if Alcatraz wasn't constantly covered with patrol guards. They were caught trying to sneak out and they were shot dead on the spot and killed. Now the legend goes that their ghosts still haunt the hallways of the utility corridor. A night guard even said he would hear the sounds of prisoner chains banging against metal walkways. Number 8. The Beast in Cell 14D. If getting thrown into a cell with no clothes or food or being forced to poop down a hole wasn't bad enough, how about being killed by some supernatural being? The legend of the Beast is about an inmate who was found dead in his cell. One night an inmate started screaming out of nowhere that there was a creature with glowing red eyes in his cell and it was trying to kill him. None of the guards came to check because no one believed him. Everyone figured he was trying to get moved to another cell or he had officially gone insane, which was pretty commonplace over there. When the guards came to check his cell in the morning, he was dead. He had been strangled to death even though he was in his cell all alone, and later that day when they were doing a head count, they reported 1 extra person. After a recount they realized that they had just made a mistake, but the guards swore that they saw the dead prisoner in the line of the original head count, like his ghost was still trapped in there. If he was a ghost in there, he probably realized he could just walk through walls and he was like, "Peace, boys." Number 7. The Butcher. I'm gonna try and choose an awesome place to die because it seems like if you die in a crap place, you just get stuck in that crap place forever walking around, where you can't get any friends and your eternity is now crap because you didn't die somewhere awesome like a roller coaster or a strip club. Like The Butcher here. The Butcher was discovered by famous psychic Sylvia Browne when she came to Alcatraz prison to see if she could talk to any of the bummed out ghosts. She connected with one who she could only name the Butcher. Upon later research, the Butcher was the name of a mob hitman that was locked away in Alcatraz years ago. His real name was Albie Maldowitz and he was murdered in the laundry room by another inmate. A very rude place to kill someone. I just washed these clothes and now they're stained with this guy's blood. Thanks a lot. Number 6. The Native American Fire. After the closure of Alcatraz in 1963, the island was left vacant until a group of Native American men took it in 1969. They did this as a way to draw attention to Native American problems in North America, and it worked. The police couldn't kick them off the island because public opinion was so much in their favor. They managed to live on the island for 19 months until a fire broke out. After that, the people of San Francisco thought it was too dangerous having them on the island and they wanted them removed. The legend goes that a group of white police officers went to the island and started the fire themselves. Number 5. Al Capone's banjo. One of the most famous inmates to be locked away in the great halls of Alcatraz was Al Capone. The gunslinging, booze-selling, fedora-wearing bandit was the prized possession of the secluded island jail, and even though he had legendary mob status, he was afraid that he would be murdered if he spent his recreation time out in the yard. So instead, he was able to negotiate with the guards to let him practice his banjo in the showers while everyone else was out playing. It said you can still hear his banjo playing when you walk down the halls of the old prison. However, it seems pretty far-fetched because Al Capone didn't die in Alcatraz. He died in his mansion in Florida from syphilis. Always wear protection. So I think it's highly unlikely that his ghost made the trip from his home in Florida to Alcatraz just to tickle some banjo strings, especially with how much his little ghost wiener would be burning. Number 4. Native American spirits. So way back when, way before Alcatraz prison was built, before the settlers came to America, the Native American people would use the island as a way to punish people. They would send people there and force them to fend for themselves on the island. Some people were even exiled there with no hope of ever returning. The native people believed that evil spirits lived on the island, and if you died there, they would torture your soul forever, which is a pretty ruthless punishment. They couldn't sentence someone to death and just let them walk into the afterlife. No, they needed to be tortured for all of eternity. It's crazy that centuries later the island was turned into a place of banishment again. It's like we just inherently knew that this island gave off major bad vibes. Like I said before, let's grab mojitos and go to the beach instead of going to this island. I don't need that stuff messing around with my aura. I'm having a great year. Number 3. The lighthouse. Before the jail was built, there was a creepy old lighthouse that sat on the island. Now nothing really happened at the lighthouse while it was standing. It was torn down to make way for the prison. But it said on a foggy night you can see the lighthouse shining its light through the fog. Do lighthouses have ghosts? Do I need to worry about inanimate objects having ghosts now? Am I gonna be haunted by my iPhone 5S when I'm 65? I'll wake up in a cold sweat like, ugh, the battery life was terrible. If this one is true, it's pretty weird but not that spooky. If this thing is real, it sounds less like something that would scare me and something more like Casper the Friendly Ghost sidekick, like Jasper the Helpful Lighthouse. Even though I'm dead, it doesn't mean I don't care about nautical safety. Boo! Number 2, the silence. So we've established that while this house of horrors was active, Alcatraz was one of the worst places you could be. There's a legend that describes one of the ways they would make this hellhole even worse. Apparently, the guards would enforce a strict no talking policy. Everyone had to remain in complete silence at all times. If anyone broke this rule, they would be tortured in unspeakable ways. Endless silence almost sounds peaceful, but I guess it wasn't because it would drive inmates crazy. I guess when you're forced to do anything, even sit quietly, it can rub you the wrong way. This maddening silence caused one of the inmates, Ruth Percival, to try and cut off his own hands. He made it through a couple of fingers before he got stopped, but you gotta give him an A for effort. And number 1 on our list is the escape. The greatest urban legend of all of Alcatraz is the escape of prisoners Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. This literally plays out like a Mission Impossible movie. They carved holes in the walls of their cells using spoons and made cardboard grates to cover the holes so the guards couldn't tell that there was a huge chunk missing from the walls. They also made dummy heads out of soap, hair, and paint supplies to put in their beds so when the guards came to check, it looked like they were still in their beds. Once they passed through the holes in the walls, they climbed up drain pipes to the roof and then used vents to climb down to outside the prison. They then used a makeshift raft to sail to the mainland, and just like that, they were never seen again. It's unknown if the 3 convicts actually made it to shore safely, but the legendary Jack LaLanne swam from Alcatraz in handcuffs when he was like 50, so I think these 3 guys running for their lives could have figured it out, but since it's a legend, we really have no idea if they made it.